As the year began, the United States was surmounting the last barriers to full reconversion. We were financially an island apart from the world. Our national income was predicted to exceed $200 billion. Never before had the nation known such freedom from want. But in this realm of abundance, we reigned alone. Across the vast expanses of the globe, there were famine, national ruin, pestilence, and moral disintegration. 4 horsemen driving civilization to the brink of an abyss. Without help, recovery might never be achieved. In the background was the growing struggle between 2 great powers to shape the post-war world. Looking toward Europe from Moscow, Soviet Russia was expansively stabbing westward, knifing into nations left empty by war, with misery and chaos as allies. On orders from the Kremlin, Russia had launched one of history's most drastic political, moral, and economic wars, a Cold War. The United States was obliged to help Europe safeguard its traditional freedoms and the independence of its nations. Gone was the spirit of wartime unity that reached its peak on that historic afternoon in April '45 at the Elbe River in Germany. Here, 2 worlds actually met, but this coalition was to be torn asunder. 2 years later, European capitals still suffering from the shooting war were battlegrounds for totalitarian aggression. Internal recovery was sabotaged through the creation of disaster and strife to the point of civil war. Russia's expansionism timetable called for dividing Europe in 2, swallowing first one half, then the other. Already an iron curtain had dropped around Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, menace to the security and institutions of democratic government. What was America's foreign policy in January 1947? Our Secretary of State as the year began was James F. Byrne, who had used tactics of patient persuasion. At Stuttgart, Germany, Byrne had made one of his strongest declarations of policy when he said, "After the First World War, America thought it could stay out of Europe's wars. That did not keep us from being forced into a Second World War. We will not again make that mistake. We intend to continue our interest in the affairs of Europe and of the world." But Russia still held firm to her belief that a depression in America would keep us out of Europe, and that confusion and hunger would win for communism. Yet America already was flashing a beacon of hope as it turned from appeasement to the diplomatic offensive. A long-term, patient but firm and vigilant containment of Russian expansive tendencies. This declaration meant that Russia must be kept within boundaries already about equal to the circumference of the globe. From the Arctic, around the Pacific coast, North China and the Middle East to Western Europe, pressure points existed in the new containment offensive. Europe, broken and vulnerable to Soviet power, became the first front in democracy's counterattack. In June, Secretary Marshall announced a plan to help Europe rebuild its shattered economy. He urged the nations to get together on their needs, to draw up their own blueprint for survival, which could then be implemented by our government. Not even the collapse of the Big Four meeting on peace treaties for Germany and Austria could minimize the gains that had been made. At this meeting, there was complete deadlock on all major issues, including Germany's economic future and reparations. But the battle of words had ended without democracy giving ground. Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov heard Secretary Marshall blame Russia for holding back world recovery. The split between 2 world statesmen was reflected in their respective uneasy capitals. For here was more than merely a clash of power politics. It was a conflict of ideals, of faith, of the very way of life.
In America, we know our opinions and actions are motivated by national conscience, inherited love for freedom's ways, symbolized this very year by 2 shrines on wheels, the Friendship Train, spontaneous expression of goodwill, and the Freedom Train, carrying the cherished original documents of American history. Across thousands of miles of tracks, into 300 American communities, an ideal conceived in the name of good citizenship.